So, like, I think the biggest insane thing about this whole letter to me is that this guy wants to build an empire, a monarchy. Don't call it a monarchy. Caliphate.
Right.
And his whole letter is about overthrowing monarchies.
Islam will continue to be triumphant until there have been 12 khulafa, all of them from Al-Quraysh.
The God of heaven will set up a kingdom that shall never be destroyed, nor shall the kingdom be left to another people. It shall break in pieces all these kingdoms and bring them to an end, and it shall stand forever.
This is my brother, my executor, and my successor among you, so listen to him and obey.
My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would have been fighting.
Whoso obeys me obeys God. Whoever disobeys me disobeys God. Whoever disobeys my commander disobeys me.
The Lord said to me, You are my son. Today I have begotten you. Ask of me, and I will make the nations your heritage, and the ends of the earth your possession.
Two systems of government, two visions for life on earth. Whichever is true changes everything. This is Christ and Khulafa.
All right. Ready and pissed off.
All right. Welcome back to another episode of Christ and Caliphate. And because it's my birthday, we're doing something very special. We are reviewing Osama bin Laden's letter to America, which I'm very excited for.
Because everybody does that on their birthday.
Right. So this is written in 2008. And the reason we're reviewing this now is because it's currently trending on TikTok. But before we get into this, it was trending on TikTok. I think it got banned from TikTok. So I don't know why. This really isn't going to help our algorithm at all. Nevertheless, it's important.
Wow, it's still showing up in YouTube Reels.
Yeah.
From those TikTok videos on, Facebook and Twitter and whatnot.
So welcome to Christians Review Osama bin Laden's letter to America. Okay, so before we get started, let's poison the well here. I just want to hear your initial reactions to reading this. We all just read it before this. We will go through it on the show, but I want to hear your guys' initial reactions to this.
Okay, so I lived through 9/11. It happened. I was in New Jersey. And really anything that has anything tied to this guy's name is make me go bleep that guy, right? Anything that comes out of his mouth, any of it, was just makes me upset. I know people who lost people that day. My own brother was supposed to have a job on the 104th floor that he didn't get. He would have been there that day. I know plenty of people that were heading into the city that day that didn't make it. My best man at my wedding saw the planes hit both towers. He was trapped there overnight trying to get out of the city. I remember all of it, and I remember afterward driving by everything and watching it smolder for months on end. So whenever I hear the rationale, right, behind something like that, I have very little tolerance for the rationale, right? So aside from bin Laden, it's the rhetoric we're really addressing, and particularly its effect in the here and now. And I'm very. It makes me remember all of the things that happened and all of the loss that we suffered and all of the sadness associated with it and anger. And honestly, bleep that guy.
So, then I'm old enough to remember 9/11 pretty vividly as well. But my initial reaction to reading this is this tracks to me like having a conversation with an unhinged homeless guy. and this guy,
or if Stalin was like an unhinged homeless guy.
Yeah, it's like, but the only difference is instead of being homeless on like the sidewalk outside of a light rail station in Seattle, this guy happens to be homeless in a cave in Afghanistan and have a bunch of people listening to him. Like, and I don't say that to make it sound like he's dumb, right? Because a lot of these guys
No,
you
he's
talk
not
to,
dumb.
no,
Right.
he's not dumb. He's not dumb. But neither of these homeless guys you talk to, there's some like flashes of brilliance in there, but it's also like completely unhinged and like
Right.
disconnected from reality as well.
Right. This is like, this thing reads like every conspiracy theory of its day, right? And then pointing back to,
Right.
and it always just lands on the doorstep of the United States, the great Satan and the little Satan.
I mean, it's putting the government against. I mean, it's trying to just put people against the government. Young people. Not like a certain generation of America.
So how old you would have been, what, 2 years old when 9/11 happened? You were born 99?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you wouldn't remember.
One.
You were 1
Yeah.
when 9/11 happened.
No, I don't know anything.
And then you'd have been 10 when Osama bin Laden died.
Yeah.
Do you remember that? Was that even?
Oh,
Because
man.
you'd have been in Mexico at
What
this
do I
time.
remember? No, I was still here.
Oh, you were still here? Okay, so you were around for that.
Gosh. Yeah, I don't remember.
And so, and then this is his.
I mean, some kids maybe talked about it in school.
Now, so this letter is in because of the 2008 financial crisis.
Uh-huh.
So from what I understand, you lost a house in that, right?
Dead.
Yeah, and then
Wow.
your dad lost a job, and then you had that was the trigger for you leaving to Mexico, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's the context of this. So with that context, let's
Right. I remember, like, yeah.
So
2008.
let's dig into this and see where it leads us. Okay, and again, the reason we do this, the reason we're reading this, is obviously not to promote it. And as tempting as it is to just like shut someone like this out, it's important to be that we as Christians actually have an answer for this kind of unhinged rhetoric, and don't just play it off as a madman, because it is compelling to people, and it's important that we actually have the thought power to like address these kind of things. And
Well, I feel like finally a group of people are seeing Osama as like a human.
Yeah.
And they're empathizing with him and agreeing and empathizing, and that's not something that was ever promoted, especially in the media, that we've ever. This is like,
yeah,
they're finally seeing the human side of this person.
So let's jump in. In the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful, to the American people, peace be upon those who follow the righteous track. Hereafter, the subject of my talk to you is the overwhelming control of capital and its effect on the ongoing war between us. I direct my talk specifically to those who support real change, especially the youth, I say from the onset. Your former president warned you previously about the devastating Jewish control of capital and about a day that would come when it would enslave you. It has happened. Your current president warns you now about the enormity of capital control, and it has a cycle whereby it devours humanity when it is devoid of the precepts of God's law, Sharia. The tyranny of the control of capital by large companies has harmed your economy as it did ours. And that was my motivation for this talk. Tens of millions of you are below the poverty line, millions have lost their homes, and millions of you have lost their jobs to mark the highest average unemployment in 60 years. Your financial system is in its totality was about to collapse within 48 hours had not the administration reverted to using taxpayers' money to rescue the vultures by using the assets of the victims. As for us, our Iraq was invaded in response to pressure from capitalists with greed for black gold, and you continue to support the oppressive Israelis in their occupation of our Palestine in response to pressures on your administration by a Jewish lobby backed by enormous financial capabilities. So let's pause there a minute. So essentially what Osama bin Laden is doing is connecting every single thing going on in the world to a giant Jewish conspiracy.
And the U.S. government.
And the U.S. government. But the U.S. government is really just a tool of this Jewish conspiracy, according to this, right? Because the first sentence of this paragraph, devastating Jewish control of capital.
Yeah.
And the Jewish lobbies,
and
right?
if the big corporations and big companies are controlled by those Jewish lobbyists, then sure, then that's what he's saying.
Yeah.
Unless if he's separating the two, then there's a couple players in this.
So this is a conflict. He's framing this as war between Muslims in the West, but with the Jews as kind of like the secret puppet masters of everything.
It's an old trope.
Yeah.
Comes from the elders, the protocol of the elders of Zion.
So, we'll delve into that more later. We just want to kind of outline how he's framing everything here, because he's going to speak a lot more. Some things he's going to say are going to be true. Some things are going to be false. But it's trying to connect everything to this like larger conspiracy he sees. Okay, next paragraph. An observer of the policies of the new administration, I was talking about the Obama administration, realized that the change is tactical and not strategic. It does not at all agree with the change you seek. There are very many indicators of this, especially concerning important matters related to your security and economy, particularly in the ongoing war between us. The previous administration was successful in implicating you in these wars against us under the premise that they are necessary for your security, or according to the promise that it would be short and would finish in 6 days or 6 weeks. 6 years have passed, and that administration is gone without realizing the victory. The man calling for change promised you victory in Afghanistan and set a time for withdrawal. Before the end of the set time, Petraeus, from the previous administration, came and asked for an extension of 6 more months. If it was the 6-day war that started by President Bush and 6 years have not been enough to finish it, then wise men should question how long would a 6-month war take, and whether you are able to fund a war that requires a large amount of money that weakens your economy and your dollar. For Obama to leave 1/3 of the soldiers in Iraq, and the statements from his administration about this, especially from Adorno about the possibility of Obama's ordering the return of forces he took out of Iraq, it would have been better for him that he disagreed with the ethics of the previous administration and adopted the truth as a friend and told you that he would not withdraw from Iraq, which may not serve the US interests, but is in the interests of large corporations. So here's a question that's worth asking here. Is Osama bin Laden correct about the inconsistency and futility of US policy in the Middle East?
Inconsistency. Maybe.
I kind of think it's a fundamental misunderstanding of how America works. So in America, though, the difference between, say, us and, like Iraq, for instance, under Saddam, is that somebody rules Iraq, and if he decides he wants to have a war go on like the Iran-Iraq war for decades, there's no getting around it. But in America, the way that the Constitution is set up is that essentially there's a chance to reset every 4 years. And if the country's going in a wrong direction, the people have a voice in saying that, I don't want a war, or I want changes in the war. I'm not happy with the way that the country's going economically, socially, militarily, and we can vote and change. So if there's an inconsistency viewed between Bush's policy and Obama's policy, right? It's because that's by design. You're able to sit there and say, as a person, I'm voting and I want my vote to count for a policy change in certain areas. And you can see this across the board, not just in military policy in the Middle East, but as it pertains to, say, something like healthcare, right? Like how we've moved back and forth on healthcare since Obama was president. So it is inconsistent by design.
By design, yeah.
Right? But then, is it futile or not? Is it a good idea? Is a completely different story. And I think a lot of that boils down to not necessarily the idea of America being involved in these countries, but the execution.
Yeah.
And how the execution is sloppy, right?
Right. And this inconsistency does contribute to that.
Right.
So
sorry, go ahead.
My friend State Department Mike talked about how the people in the US State Department were sort of envied the people working for the Russian or Chinese, foreign service because they're dictatorships, they can basically set like long-term policy goals which America just can't in the same way, and that's certainly a strength in some ways and a weakness in others.
Right.
So I think here he is tapping into something that's like a genuine
issue.
I think the disconnect also is that America at its genesis is not meant to be an interventionist country. So the policy change is supposed to reflect domestic job policy. Some international relations. But now, where we are and where we stand today, America post World War II is everywhere.
I have a question about what exactly he's trying to say about Obama in the last paragraph. Is he saying that he was being like a liar to the American people, or like dishonest about his agenda, or is he saying, like, I'm confused what his stance is?
What I see is that it seems like he just wanted Obama to say we're in it for the corporations. We're not in it for any other reason.
Really? Okay.
So I think
is that what
I think I think his view of Obama is interesting in this letter, because it's almost like he has hope for Obama, but kind of sees Obama as surrounded by corrupt people and thinks, oh, Obama has a chance to be the right guy for the job. So let's have a look at the next paragraph, because I think it gets into that a little more.
Okay.
The course of policies of the present administration in several areas clearly reveals that whoever enters the White House, even with good intentions to safeguard the people's interest, is no more than a train operator. His only task is to keep the train on the tracks that are laid down by the lobbyists in New York and Washington to serve their interests first. Even it is counter to your security and economy. Any president who tries to move the train from the lobbyist tracks to a track for the American people's interests will confront a very strong opposition that pressures from the lobbyists. Your president described the decision by the court in favor of corporations to intervene in the political arena as a victory. But it is not a victory for the American people, except for the big corporations. There is no doubt that it is a right, and it is also right for the administration to support the oppressive Israelis for the continued occupation of our land and the killing of our brothers, marking a victory for the Jewish lobby. The president was not able to defend you against the security and economic loss. The way for change in freeing yourselves from the pressure of the lobbyists is not through Republican or the Democratic parties, but through undertaking a great revolution for freedom. Not to free Iraq from Saddam Hussein, but to free the White House and to free Barack Hussein so he can implement the change you seek. It does not include improvement of your economic situation and ensure your security, but more importantly, helps him making a rational decision to save humanity from the harmful greenhouse gases that threaten its destiny.
Wow. Yeah. We want to talk about a train going off the tracks?
Yeah.
Right.
So, like here, to me, the insincerity starts to shine through here a little bit for a number of reasons. Now, one, but again, you see here how he kind of seems to think that Obama's like a good guy, and if he just didn't have all these corporations telling him what to do, he could really move America in the right direction. So Bin Laden is kind of saying, yeah, this guy could be the right guy for the job, and if you just have a revolution and free him to do what he needs to do, then the world will be put to right. But when he ends with save humanity from the harmful greenhouse gases that threaten its destiny, this doesn't actually fit into Osama bin Laden's worldview.
Is he not talking about the corporations there?
I mean, sure he is, but Osama bin Laden does not think the world is going to get destroyed by greenhouse gases. He believes that...
No, but he knows that his audience believes that.
Exactly. This is exactly
the people he's trying to reach.
The people. This is a concern of the people he's trying to reach.
Well, yeah.
And it's not a personal concern of his.
Right.
Why?
Right.
Because he doesn't believe the world's going to end because of climate emergencies.
It's actually a really great use of propaganda.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
He believes that, Jesus and the Mahdi will return and put the world. He's not fundamentally worried about this, but he knows that American youth are, and is trying to be like, oh yeah, this is a problem. We believe in fighting together.
This entire paragraph is essentially a giant wedge issue, right? And if you recall, the election of 2008, he ran on hope and change.
Yeah,
Obama ran on hope and change, and a lot of young people came out and voted for Obama.
Mm-hmm.
So this is an appeal to their mindset.
That's what I remember.
Right? This is an appeal to their
Right.
things, the things that group of voters care about, like climate change and
yes,
that
that's
kind of
what I
thing.
remember now.
But also, like, let's insert some anti-Semitism.
Yeah.
Right.
And also notice that he refers to him as Barack Hussein.
Right.
Yeah.
Right? He's trying to be like, that's my guy.
Yeah.
And so in me, I immediately just kind of assume that's there to like piss off Republicans and just kind of like rile everyone up against each other.
Oh, sure. It's a complete wedge issue, right? Even Obama would be like, bro, I am not your bro.
Yeah.
Right?
In fact, the beautiful irony of this is Obama is the one that, you know, had Bin Laden killed, right? So
right.
didn't go quite how he was hoping it was going to go. Let's keep going because there's lots of
This is insane.
Yes.
I can't.
Okay.
I can't. What world do we live in? Or lived in?
This one.
Well, I guess we're still living through it.
Yeah. Okay. So for the American youth to succeed in this change, they need to relive the history of their ancestors and the conditions in their country more than 2 centuries ago. They need to understand the similarities during the era and their present situation, especially in their fundamental conditions. The British Parliament sided with corporations then against the interests of the citizens. You've noticed that Congress's stand with corporations against the people's interests when they refuse to legislate against the interference in the election by corporations. The British military governor in the United States used to have the right to appoint judges and mayors. Similarly, the corruption is deep-rooted now in all higher authorities, thus giving authorities over these offices to corporations. Subsequently, the higher court adjudicating their support of political financing by corporations under such circumstances. Like, this is just like a completely wrong framing of the Revolutionary War in the first place.
Right.
Like, is he talking about tea? Talking about tea.
I mean, in the next paragraph.
He does mention tea in the next paragraph.
Well, that's the equivalent of like the corporation.
I mean,
yeah, but they weren't protesting the price of tea. They were protesting the British Parliament, thinking they controlled them and could raise taxes.
Right. And then this conveniently also leaves out the King George. Right? Like this whole narrative is like, oh, it's just the corporations that were doing it. Like George was the ultimate authority and, you know, controlled the East India Tea Company, right? Like this doesn't address that. It doesn't address that there's a monarch behind it, pushing it all to happen.
Right. And again, Americans didn't mind paying for tea.
Right.
They were not protesting paying for tea. They were protesting paying taxes on tea.
Right.
There was not a war against corporations. It was a war against the control of British Parliament, ultimately.
And it's also important to realize that everybody knows this.
Right.
This is not like a secret. You know what I mean? This is what makes this conspiratorial.
Yeah.
Because everybody understands, every history book, right? Like everyone understands that this was not about corporations. It was about, you know, all of the other things that became like you know, the Bill of Rights, for instance, right? Like the reason why we can't, the Fourth Amendment exists, for instance, or the Second Amendment or the First Amendment exist, not because of corporations, but because of British.
Yeah, I really don't know where he could possibly, like, I mean, yeah, I really don't know where he could possibly, what conclusion he could possibly draw from this for his revolution that he's speaking of, because like,
because it's propaganda.
Of course,
thing is like,
I mean, he's saying like,
it's like Karl Marx like went and smoked a bong and then.
And he is saying
that
like
might be what's happening.
And he is saying like, yeah.
I know those guys love their hashish, right?
Yeah. But and he is saying like, without this revolution, like nothing's gonna change from the revolution to like now, like corporations or tea companies are always gonna be hand in hand with the higher authorities, whether that be a king or whether that be like the Obama. Like, this doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
But
All right, let's keep going
Yeah.
because I
Sure.
want to get to what's in paragraph 3.
Reading the book by the intellectual Thomas Paine helped your fathers in the revolution against the oppressors. It is useful for you to read it under the current similar circumstances. You are in need of people like Thomas Paine to publish books pointing out the similarities between the two phases, and that will have a similar effect. You also are in need of men with courage and initiative like those of your forefathers, and at that time, when they refused to allow one company to harm the interests of the United States, a company that had a monopoly on tea and its prices. Okay, not what that was about. Yet there are now many companies that endanger the United States economy, which continue to be vulnerable to collapse, and they also formulate the policies of the White House. They threw hundreds of thousands of soldiers against us and have formed an alliance with the Israelis to oppress us and occupy our land. That was the reason for our response on the 11th.
Wow.
No, I'm joking.
Seriously.
So
No, that was my response. What you just did was my response to the opening stanza.
I was letting him. I was like, all right, keep talking, but like,
Yeah, from the desk of Osama bin Laden. Crunch, 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 crunch. But go ahead. Yeah.
So everything he's talking about here, it's just it's talking about the U.S. corporations driving war in the Middle East. But he's talking, this is the reason for our response on the 11th. So the only real war America had fought in the Middle East up to that point was the first Gulf War, which all the first Gulf War was defending Kuwait from being invaded by Saddam Hussein.
Right.
So the only other thing he can do to kind of allege, aggression there is talk about the United States supporting, Israel up until this point, and that's kind of what we're about to get into here. Okay, let's jump straight to that, right?
Sure.
Palestine has been under occupation for decades. None of your presidents talked about it until after September 11th, when Bush realized that your oppression and the tyranny against us were part of the reason for the attack. Then he talked about the necessity of 2 states. Obama is trying to address the issue with the same solutions suggested by his predecessor. They're quilting fruitless solutions not of concern to us. If you want a real settlement that guarantees your security in your country and safeguards your economy from being depleted in a manner similar to our war of attrition against the Soviet Union, then you have to implement a roadmap that returns the Palestine land to us, all of it, from sea to the river. It is an Islamic land, not subject to being traded or granted to any party.
Okay. This is factually not true.
Right.
That it was like none of your presidents talked about it until after September 11th.
Right.
Because there is now a week or two ago, Hillary Clinton was talking about the conflict in the Middle East, and she said that it was Clinton who proposed the 2-state solution, right, and brought the two parties together. I can't remember who the Israeli prime minister was at the time.
Ehud Barak.
It was Barak. Okay, so brought Barak and
Yasser Arafat.
and Yasser Arafat together, and Arafat rejected the deal, right? Like, but that's factually inaccurate.
Right.
Like
And
this idea of a 2-state solution has been around for a long time.
So like the unhinged homeless guy who has flashes of brilliance and then lots of incoherent rambling.
Right.
Osama bin Laden is also kind of the hero of this story in Osama bin Laden's mind as well. Right, because that's exactly right. Bill Clinton had both parties to America to try and work out a 2-state solution.
Right.
The year before 9/11 happened.
Right.
So
right.
So you can't put this on America and say America is just interested in endless wars and is not interested in peace.
And it happened a bunch of times after that, right? Like,
right.
Yeah.
So it's just an untrue characterization of America's involvement in Israel and Palestine. Not to say that America's involvement in it has been perfect. It has not.
No.
But the problem here is what he outlines. He is very uninterested in any practical solutions to the problems.
Right. They are quilting fruitless solutions not of concern to us.
Right. So, essentially what you're seeing in here is an uncompromising revolutionary mindset. He wants everything or he wants nothing.
Yeah, and it's also like, listen to this line. If you want a real settlement that guarantees your security in your country and your safeguard to your economy, like, it's almost like that's coming from the barrel of a gun.
It is.
Right? Like, I'm holding a gun to your head.
Yeah.
And if you don't take my way out, then I'm going to pull the trigger. Right? Like, and not just on you, on your economy, on your, So, again, this is not just the mindset of a terrorist, right? Of a revolutionary. This is also a terrorist mindset.
Yeah.
And it's important to differentiate the fact that there are revolutionaries, okay? And then there are terrorists. And what a revolutionary will do is like why wasn't the American Revolution a terrorist op, right? Because it wasn't targeted against civilians. But a terrorist will call themselves a revolutionary, but then they'll target civilians.
No, I actually believe that revolutionary should be as dirty a word as terrorist is in Christian vernacular, and I don't think the American Revolution would really have characterized itself in that way.
As a revolution,
they wouldn't. I don't believe the founding fathers would have really thought of themselves that way. Because what they're trying. So the French Revolution, right, is basically let's burn everything down and rebuild.
Mm-hmm.
The American
they didn't want any part of that.
Right. The American Revolution was not that way.
Right.
The American Revolution was we just want what British law is already supposed to give us.
Right.
So the founding fathers were not, they were not just militants living in a cave somewhere.
Right.
They were actually, a lot of them were like government officials who felt responsibility to the people they themselves represented,
right,
and felt the higher part of the system was not representing them properly.
There's my professor, his name is Dr. Jonathan Mendelow. He is the Dean of Politics at Rider University. We talked a lot about political revolutions. I took a class on this. And the idea that what label aside, label people aside. Of course, the founding fathers didn't want to have anything to do with the revolution because they didn't want to have anything to do with the French Revolution, right? And it was more of we are standing up against tyranny, right? Like we're planting our foot in the ground and trying to say that the British crown is imposing things upon us, right? That you were saying, that are not guaranteed to British citizens,
right?
That they're not having their kids taken out of their houses, right? They're not being forced to board soldiers in their homes,
right.
But you're doing that to us. But the thing that facilitates is what violence is political, right? Like revolutionary violence is political violence.
Yeah.
It's not a street fight. It's not two cartels going at it, right?
Yeah.
This is based on politics. And then who are the people that you are acting out against, right? Are you attacking, redcoats, right? Or are you attacking, British citizens in the streets, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's important to understand that, like, the revolutionary is motivated by politics.
Yeah.
Right.
Again, and I think Osama bin Laden is, but I think even if he was only attacking government targets, like I'd still, even if the only plane that crashed that day was into the Pentagon,
right,
he'd still be a terrorist.
No, he's still a terrorist because it's like the motivation is not for a revolution. It's to instill fear. Right.
Yeah.
So all of those attacks were designed to cripple us with fear. And, it's not like he didn't have plenty of opportunity when he was in Afghanistan fighting Soviets or whatever to understand that, the just attacking military, like a military force, because he references it here, right? Like we're going to draw them into a war of attrition. We're going to use guerrilla warfare. We're going to do, but I'm going to try and tag this to the American Revolution, right? And then also tag it to Palestine.
Right. And this is what but this is what revolutionaries do, and this is what conspiracy theorists do, is they try and connect a whole group of dots together that do not actually belong together.
Right.
Because it basically wants to make the problem so big and unsolvable, the only solution to it is revolution.
Right.
Palestine, Israel, corporations, greenhouse gases, Obama, Bush, Afghanistan. Look, the only way to do this is revolution.
Right. It's like throwing, what can I throw against the wall?
Right.
Which one will stick with you?
Because what I want is for everything to be burned down so something can be rebuilt in its place.
Right.
And that is exactly who Osama bin Laden is.
Mm-hmm.
Not necessarily for us. I think he doesn't really care what happens in America.
Right.
He cares what happens in the Middle East. And he wants to burn the existing Middle Eastern order down.
Right.
So they can rebuild their utopia.
Yeah,
Well,
and it's also, go ahead.
Going
sorry.
off of that, like when he says, give us back Palestine, and like this is an Islamic thing. Like he hasn't talked about Islam a lot. He mentioned Sharia potentially, but like he hasn't talked about it yet. And then like I guess how at that time, like how true was that sentiment that he was unifying the Middle East and Palestine? And like what would a Palestinian like what was the sentiment of Palestinians to him back in the day?
I mean, I think in 2008,
Truly,
Hamas would definitely be pro bin Laden.
right.
Right. They're in the same sort of mindset. But I think the average.
I mean, I kind of feel like it might be that way in 2023 too. So.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
But I think the average Palestinian, right? If you're a Palestinian who wants a Palestinian nation state,
Right.
then Osama bin Laden is ideologically at odds with that person.
Yeah.
Because notice how he refers to our Iraq, our Palestine.
Yeah.
Right. This is a Saudi dude living in Afghanistan.
Right.
Or Pakistan.
Right.
In the end.
In the end, yeah.
So he doesn't see Osama bin Laden's worldview does not see national borders. He sees one giant land that belongs to the Muslims, and he wants to eliminate Saudi Arabia. He wants to eliminate Egypt. He wants to eliminate Iraq. He wants to eliminate Israel, rebuild Palestine, and then eliminate Palestine too, and just make it one.
And essentially make it a caliphate.
Yeah.
And right.
Well, yeah, right.
So let's finish here and then do some more analysis. In conclusion, be assured that we do not fight for mere killing, but to stop the killing of our people. It is a sin to kill a person without proper justifiable cause, but terminating his killer is a right. You should be aware that justice is the strongest army and security offers the best livelihood. You lost it by your own making when you supported the Israelis in occupying our land and killing our brothers in Palestine. The road to safety starts with stopping of aggression. Palestine shall not be seen captive, for we will try to break its shackles. The United States shall pay for its arrogance with the blood of Christians and their funds. Peace be upon those who follow the righteous track.
That was a
Barf emoji.
weak conclusion.
Yeah.
That was a weak conclusion that didn't really incorporate his thesis or
because
his.
the hash wore off.
Yeah.
It's like, it's like he got sleepy.
Like, listen,
It's like-
the corporations are ruining your lives, and I'm starting to get headache. In conclusion, free Palestine.
Yeah, one of my wives, bring me some munchies. I'm like,
Started out strong.
Fatima, bring me the edibles.
I was going to say Fatima. Yeah, that's.
Come on,
oh
dude.
my
It's like you didn't
gosh.
even. It's okay. It's okay. I mean, yeah.
In conclusion.
Whoa. Yeah.
In conclusion.
This is crazy.
Well, there's a threat in there, right?
Yeah.
So the whole last couple of things, the road to safety starts with the stopping of aggression, except before, again, I'm holding a gun to your head and you have to do what I want.
Yeah.
Right? And then on top of that, then we'll have peace.
Well,
right? It's crazy. Yeah.
On a surface level, it's crazy. But like one of the big things is that like he hasn't in this addressed his worldview at all. Just like, wouldn't you say that like there's a bunch of assumptions, like yeah, there's a bunch of assumptions here in the end. Whether he pulls from the Quran or from the Hadiths or from where, I'm not sure. But like they're there, the assumptions of like rightful retaliation, vengeance, all those things. Like, it's just that he didn't explicitly state them word for word. They're just hidden.
Right. And what shows here is this revolutionary mindset, which I would say is the same mindset that exists in the sort of communist revolutionaries and in the jihadists as well. They share a great deal in common as far as their worldview goes. The first being that people are inherently good. Like communists and the sort of Islamic sources believe that people are a blank slate, basically, right? In the tabula rasa would be the sort of Western term for that, and then fitra would be the Islamic term for that. So, if people are inherently pure and good, and that's how the world works, then why are there so many problems in the world?
Well, that's fertile ground for a straw man, right? And then you can move that straw man argument wherever you want. You know, it's not you, it's the corporation. It's not you, it's the Zion. It's not you, it's you know, the president of the United States. It's not this, and nothing ever points back to, hey, you know, you might have a sin nature.
You might have a problem.
You might be separated from God, and a lot of the discord and disharmony that are happening in your life right now are because of your separation from God.
Any sort of personal, individual responsibility.
Right. And I mean, you know, I think those words get hijacked a lot too in politics, you know, like pull yourself up by your bootstraps. When we're saying personal responsibility, we're not talking about personal responsibility for prosperity. We're not talking about personal responsibility, you know, in a political sense. We're talking about taking ownership of my sin nature and understanding that I need to be forgiven for it, right? And I need to be cleansed of my sin. It's not that, you know, I can do that. Like revolutionaries, for instance, starting in Rwanda, but now you can see it at work in like the PLO and Hamas, Al Qaeda, and some of these organizations. The idea that you could only be pure by shedding the blood of your oppressors, right? So that started in the Rwandan, you know, in the Rwandan revolution, but found its let's just say apex in these Islamic revolutions, you know.
So but if you in that mindset, right? If you think about you think about what that necessitates, right? If you believe the average person is good, and then the problem is the system, which it always is, then that must mean that uniquely evil people must be the ones controlling the system.
You know, is it me, or does this just entire letter just kind of scream of like, all right, you know, he's a Muslim who believes in the Quran, but everything about this is Marxist, right? Like so much of it is Marxist. It's like the idea of corporations, some of the fundamental principles of America, you know, and then like let's just tack on some good old fashioned, you know, anti-Semitism from the protocol of the elders of Zion. Like it just totally it reads like, all right, you know, Stalin and Marx and Obama, excuse me, Osama had a brain baby, and wrote a letter, right? Like, yeah.
I
mean, again, I think he has a certain form of intelligence about him. He's like a widely read man, so I'm sure to some extent he finds some kindred spirits in these things, in that he takes what he wants to see and just sort of like synchronizes it with his own worldview.
Mm-hmm. Right. And
there's just so many problems.
So, you know,
so many problems.
Mao, Pol Pot, and Stalin all said these things too, right? And the French Revolution said it.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, again, it's a natural outgrowth of this idea that people are basically good or blank slates, because if the average person is not the problem with the world, then some maniacal force has to be. And in Osama bin Laden's case, it's the Jews, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think the thing that we have to keep in mind is, all right, the American political system is not pure. It's got impurities in it. And the impurities are people, for instance, seeking after power that they shouldn't have, right? Or staying in power too long or whatever. You know what? I'm gonna pause what I'm saying.
Yeah, Sophia's exploding.
What do you have?
Can we follow his train track for a minute? He didn't write the conclusion, but maybe we can extract a conclusion for him. Is that like, okay, say the youth does do this revolution, like what happens? What happens in America, and then what happens in his caliphate? Because like he's trying to, he already talked about like he's already talking about the war with the Soviet Union. So like I don't get it.
So Osama.
What is his conclusion?
I can tell you what his end game is.
The 1990s Taliban.
Yeah. So Osama bin Laden's end game
in
right?
America,
everywhere. Go ahead.
What Osama bin Laden is really after is the collapse of the government of Saudi Arabia.
Right.
That's his.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, totally.
That's his dream.
Right.
The collapse of the government of Saudi Arabia.
Yes, and the removal of the House of Saud from power. That's his end game.
And okay, keep going.
So
keep on.
So basically, Al Qaeda is started by Osama bin Laden and Ayman al-Zawahiri, right? Ayman al-Zawahiri is the brains of the operation. Osama bin Laden is the, looks and the conspiracy
marketing
theories, right? Yeah. He's the brand guy.
Yeah.
And basically, they want to reshape the Muslim world into being one entity.
Right.
And having the royal family rule over Saudi Arabia is the biggest obstacle to uniting the Muslim world, because that's where Mecca is, where Medina is, and
that's where the American corporations are.
Well, there's American military bases there, and American corporations, and there's they sell oil to America. So the Saudi royal family has a lot of its power because they're friends with America and sell us oil, right?
I see.
That's why they're rich, and that's why they're powerful. So Osama bin Laden thinks that he wants to neutralize American foreign influence so that there's a blank playing field with Saudi Arabia and Egypt. And what he thinks is if America's out of the equation, then the average Quran-believing, Hadith-believing Muslim in Saudi Arabia and Egypt can rise up and overthrow their governments and bring a new order of Muslim power in the world, transcending nation states.
But they can only do that if what happens with America?
If America just gets sick of intervening in the Middle East.
Oh, well, listen, America is the roadblock. I mean, since we're...
And stops buying oil?
Stops buying oil,
Right.
Right. So
that's what
greenhouse gases, right? So
Right.
This
is what... Yeah. And stops buying the oil.
Yeah.
And like what... I don't... Okay. Okay. I mean... Okay.
Yeah, and again, he doesn't believe that. Right? Because let's just say
I'm
he's
just so
successful
curious.
and winds up being in charge of, Saudi Arabia, right? And
Yeah.
oil fields in Iraq and all these other different places. What do you think he's going to do with it? Right? You think he's just going to let it sit there in the ground?
Right.
No. Liar.
He's going to build up his empire, but that's great. So that's insane. So like, I think the biggest insane thing about this whole letter to me is that this guy wants to build an empire, a monarchy. Don't call it a monarchy. Caliphate.
Right.
And his whole letter is about overthrowing monarchies and overthrowing empires and overthrowing a democracy that isn't a real democracy.
Because there won't be any corporations
because
involved.
But like those two, that it's just not sound. It's just not logical. It just doesn't work.
Well, I think
like his whole argument is just
the problem with this entire
sound.
rhetoric, okay, is how it's manifesting itself today. Okay, so this was written in 2008, and now we're in 2023, and it's finding life again because of the current situation in Gaza, right?
Yes.
Like it's and it's inflaming all of the bad things, right? It's like,
yeah, somebody was like, look, this guy already wrote about everything that's happening. Like,
yeah,
look, you guys, like, yeah.
yeah, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. And he's like,
Right.
It's pretty bad when when that guy is using your slogan,
Right.
right? Like when that guy's using your slogan, it doesn't matter who made it, chicken, egg, whatever.
Yeah.
It's like, look at the intention, right? The intention is to assert Israel and Jews as a corrupting thing,
And like,
right?
he's throwing the Christians
you're talking
in there
about
too.
like, yeah, it's the Christians. It's the. I mean, who else are we going to throw in there, right? It's also
Yeah.
Uncle Frankie's wife down the
Yeah.
street who leaves her garbage out. You know what I mean? It just seems like,
Yes.
what can we throw in this letter and what will stick?
And the reason it's like this is because this is how revolutionary thinking works.
Okay.
Right.
So the
Just
Marxists,
divide
the
and conquer.
Islamists,
Right.
their whole rhetoric is based on poking holes in what's there already and
Mhm.
hoping you don't ask too many questions about what comes next.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and again, think about it in terms of some of the precepts in the Quran. You're not supposed to question, right? You're just supposed to fall in line with authority. You're not supposed to go against it. So, and of course he's looking at himself as like, look, the most cynical thing is that you're going to be the inheritor of all these things. You're going to be the guy in charge. You're certainly not going to come and find these people that you're writing this letter to and go, now this is yours. You may govern it as you please, right?
I give Gotham back to you.
Oh my gosh.
Where'd you get that?
I made it.
So, okay. So going off of that, then,
So great.
Like, that was great.
I want
Going-
one of those
going
for my
off.
birthday.
So going off of that, like, I guess what's the biggest? I guess like, how is this letter affecting America, or like not even America, like some extreme leftist, and like,
Well, I mean, I don't think you need to be an extreme
are
leftist.
are they just like?
Think about what's happening now. The TikTok videos I watched.
Like, what's the biggest impact? I guess, yeah.
I think the TikTok videos that I've been watching and the people like, well, I didn't watch them on TikTok, but the effect has been,
It's crazy.
Osama was just like trying to liberate people, right? Like it's this total like social justice warrior
Yeah.
thing, and he's trying to liberate the oppressed people of all around the world, but particularly in Palestine, and that's why there's sympathy towards him now.
And I'm suspecting that the biggest impact that this letter had on people is just to look at the government in America and go after them, basically. Not just like the current administration, but like just all these administrations that have been. And yeah, I think that there definitely is this sentiment of we're going to go after like the...
I mean,
maybe I don't know if maybe some people want to go after the Jewish lobbyists, whatever that means, but like,
But I think the reason this resonates with people today is because I think we have our modern culture is kind of raised on revolutionary ideas, right? They're kind of everywhere. So
Sure.
if you look at the the riots in 2020, you look at the kind of whole defund the police movement
Yes.
in the 2020s here in Seattle, and everything there. Everything there is based on this revolutionary mindset that the system is so thoroughly corrupt that it just needs to be completely removed, and whatever we build next will be better for that. And it's tempting for everybody, because the biggest temptation, Jesus says, before you remove the speck from someone else's eye, first remove the plank from your own eye. Which means the speck is always the temptation is to always see the speck in your brother's eye before anything else.
Sure.
So revolutionaries go to people and say, the problem's not you, it's the world you live in. It's everyone else's fault your life sucks.
And
and
it's also
Amazon and Microsoft
that's also how they govern,
the oil.
right? When they get in power, It's like the reason why my policies aren't working is because of that person, right? So there are so many countries in the Middle East, and I could name them by name. Turkey, you know, where the leader will get up and be like, the reason why rent is so high is because the landlords are raising the rent, and they shouldn't do that. It's like, bro, the currency's not worth anything. Like everyone is working their butts off and not bringing home enough money to like make it. So it's the policy, but the dictator, the revolutionary, they need a straw man. They need it to be someone else's fault, and they keep that moral high ground that way.
So I'm going to make the argument that revolution is this kind of revolutionary mindset is we should be cynical about it as Christians. I think revolution is the means that the evil within the heart of the oppressed replaces the evil within the hearts of the oppressors. Because what it does, it looks at you and this is what he's doing here. He's like saying it's never justified to kill an innocent person, but none of you were innocent because the U.S. taxpayers were complicit in the U.S. aggression in Saudi Arabia, and therefore that's right. He knows he is going to get thousands of Muslims killed by his actions, right? The reason he did 9/11 was so that America would invade Afghanistan.
Right.
Because he's playing this giant ends justify the means chess game.
Right.
So because he thinks the world he builds on the other side will have less death and be better for people. Therefore, it's justified for him to murder his way to it.
And that it's like a divine right too.
Right.
That he can do this because of his divine right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually interesting because when you compare this with like the Torah and the New Testament, right? There are explicit admonitions and warnings within the Torah, for instance, to the children of Israel to not forget that they were slaves and to not do the things that their oppressors did. Right. And then, in the New Testament, you see it like in the Sermon on the Mount, like turn the other cheek, carry the pack further. Right. Don't respond to evil with evil, but conquer, like the book of Romans says, don't respond evil with evil, but conquer evil with good. Right. Do good to those who oppress you. Therefore, and by doing that, you will be sons and daughters of God. So the revolutionary mindset is like blood, right? Like we need to shed blood, or we need to not all revolution, but revolution in this concept is that blood needs to be shed in order for things to be made right. And what the scriptures show us is that nothing is right without God. The world is fallen, and that the only thing that can bring about this healing of the world
is God himself.
And doing the things that he commands us to do.
Not
right?
the Ummah, and not like the ones on the right track.
Yeah, and again, that's very exclusive, right? So, only people who are on the right track are...
I wonder if he wanted to, like, also, like, really get into the hearts and brains of, like... Well, yeah, of, like... And I wonder if, like, Muslim Americans... if they hadn't been, because that's when this whole thing happened, right? Like we've made videos about this, about like how targeted they were and how like afraid they were and how, people, how discriminated they were and all that stuff. And I wonder if he's even trying, like when he's writing to the people in the right track, like I wonder if he's specifically trying to get into those people's brains.
Yeah, sure.
We did a podcast.
But that didn't happen. Yeah.
We did a podcast about Rami season 1.
Mm-hmm.
And in Rami season 1, it's set up as a dialogue between a young Rami and Osama bin Laden. Right. Like, appearing to him in his kitchen,
right.
eating strawberries together,
Right.
So, and then the appeal is, you should be more like me. And Rami's response is, I'm nothing like you.
Right.
Right. Like, I'm nothing like you. I reject you because you're violent, because you murder people, right? And again, it's also important, no matter what people want to believe about bin Laden,
Yeah.
he's a murderer. He's
Yeah.
a genocidal maniac. And if he's in control of things, he's going to
He's gonna
kill
keep
a
doing it.
lot of people, right? And ultimately to keep himself in power. So again, there's that.
Well, so again, I think the Christian, we should wrap this up.
Okay.
But I think the Christian, the difference in the Christian worldview for any of these things is that, firstly, we see the problem is in ourself first and foremost, and we want to be working on that.
Right.
And the way we expect God to work in the world is not through the overthrow of the system, but through gradual change, person by person, heart by heart, mind by mind. Jesus describes the growth of the kingdom of God like that of a mustard seed.
Right.
And I think it's very important that we're aware of what people like this are trying to do and don't fall into the trap.
Right.
Right. So what does Osama bin Laden want the average American to think about the average Muslim living in America? Terrorist.
Right.
What does Osama bin Laden want the average Muslim to feel like living in America? Unwelcome here.
Right.
So the best way we can fight against things like this is by not taking the bait, not falling for the trap, sticking to our own principles of assuming people are innocent until proven guilty. But what I want to end with is I was reading about talking about David and Absalom and Ahithophel in 2 Samuel with
David, Absalom,
Leah. We're talking about someone's death, and Leah said he went to hell, right? And I'm saying, well, the Bible doesn't tell us whether he went to heaven or hell. And she says, I wish the Bible included a little note saying whether someone went to heaven or hell when they die. But in this case, I feel like it's pretty unambiguous that he's now in hell. I wouldn't have to worry about him.
Oh, Osama bin Laden. Gotcha.
The life would be much easier. She's out of the mouth of babes, right?
Yeah.
Like, don't listen to that guy because he went to hell.
Again, if he repented while the bullet is in mid-air, flying towards his cranium, then he could be in heaven. I don't think that's what happened.
I don't think that's
maybe
what happened either.
a next video, because we do have to wrap up, and probably a next video that would be good is maybe even just making a video about what the Bible talks about when it talks about like commerce and trade and economy.
Let's do it
in general, because like
wow.
Yeah, because that's a big
elephant
that could be good to hit on.
Great, let's do it. Well, guys, thanks for listening. Thanks for trudging through this eloquent rant with us, and we'll see you next time.